Welcome to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Today we are talking about how we are trying to define a role for the World Bank Group as a global connector, and we are multilateral, obviously, in this South-South knowledge agenda. There's a lot of momentum around South-South, and it is essentially a country-driven agenda. And it's an agenda that is owned by the countries and that needs to be owned by the countries. And it is an agenda that really begs very hard questions about what the role of multilaterals like the World Bank is in this agenda. I'm first going to do a little bit of a presentation which gives a little bit of background on how we see this agenda in the World Bank Group, and then how we try to define a useful role for ourselves. What are we seeing on this picture here? In one sense, for me, what you're seeing on this picture is very representative for the paradigm shift that we've been seeing over the last few years. Yeah? Coming from the World Bank, I guess that many people will think that this is a picture of, let's say, a World Bank supervision mission to a construction project in some country in Asia. Yeah? And that's what it looks like at first sight, but it's not what it is. In reality, this is something very, very different. What this is a group of engineers, highway engineers from the Caucasus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia, who are visiting a group of highway engineers in China. And they are learning about the maintenance of express highways that are constructed in very difficult terrain. Now, it's not that the countries in the Caucasus do not have the financing to build such highways. They do. In fact, there is an abundant amount of financing options for those countries. What they are struggling with is with the capacity that one needs and the understanding that one needs to actually bring such projects to a good closure. For example, in the aspect of the maintenance of such roads after they are built. Yeah? So what we're seeing here is not a group of World Bank people or consultants hired by a donor to teach something to Caucasian highway engineers. What we're seeing here are Caucasian highway engineers going to China and as peers learning from each other on what the challenges are and the important aspects are of maintaining express roads in very difficult terrain. Yeah? And this is exactly the type of paradigm shift that we're talking about. We are moving, and we have moved, in fact, from a world where development cooperation is about the transfer from the north to the south of money and expertise. Yeah? What we're seeing more and more is that countries are ready to share their experiences, and countries are seeing that they want to learn from the experiences of other developing countries. So this begs the question for a organization like the World Bank Group, and I think for many other donors as well, this begs the question, like, what is our role in this changing landscape? So let's look at this picture for a moment. Yeah? This picture is a picture of a typical World Bank Institute activity a few decades ago. Yeah? What we're seeing there is a seminar of what at the time was called the EDI, the Economic Development Institute, before it was named the World Bank Institute. And in the Economic Development Institute, what we used to do for decades, we used to bring once or twice or 3 times a year key policymakers from developing countries over to Washington, D.C. to learn together from the lessons learned from the theories that were underpinning the economic development models of the North. It was essentially a North-South transfer of knowledge, facilitated by the World Bank in this case, by EDI, a North-South transfer of knowledge through a training format. Yeah. After some time, EDI, and then later on the World Bank Institute, when in 2000 EDI was renamed into WBI, we became very good at this. Yeah? We started to scale this up. We had more and more of such offerings, and at a certain point we started to use technology for those offerings. We started to broadcast courses and classes, and we were reaching many more participants in many more countries. But fundamentally, the model remained the same. The model remained a model of training, yeah, provided to policymakers and at a certain point also practitioners in developing countries. Yeah? And really the model being learning from models that have succeeded in the North. Yeah? That was the view actually of capacity development that we had for a very long time. But at a certain point in time, these kinds of ideas and these models really, the validity of those came to an end. And there are a few things that we should point to. One thing is that something that in the World Bank itself was a report that really woke us up big time. It was a report done by the Independent Evaluation Group about training activities financed and organized by the World Bank Group. And what the report did was to confirm with numbers what many of us already felt for quite a while. Yeah? That training does not necessarily lead to development capacity. Yeah? By itself, training does not lead to results. What we're seeing is that people learn useful things through training, but they don't necessarily apply those things. Training does not lead to change, and capacity development is all about change. So I'm going to show two quotes from this report, which I think are quite telling. Yeah, this was a report that came out in 2008. So over the past decade, the report says the bank has financed approximately $720 million in training annually. That's a lot of money. Yeah? Most of bank finance training was found to result in individual participant learning, but only about half resulted in substantial changes to workplace behavior or enhanced development capacity. So there's something wrong with training. The other piece that has been changing quite dramatically is that right now, as all of us know, we live in a very, very different world. Yeah? Look at this picture that you're seeing there. This is an outsourcing center, an IT outsourcing center in Nigeria. Yeah? So if you look at the IT industry, and specifically within the IT industry, the global business process or the business process outsourcing industry, there is a huge potential for this industry. Yeah? So this is a talent-driven industry. There's a potential globally of $500 billion per year. Yeah? A majority of that, about 85% people estimate, is still untapped. Yeah? Africa has a long way to go in this and is very keen to explore these possibilities. Yeah? This can create thousands and thousands of jobs, quality jobs, new jobs for young people in an industry that is where there's really a lot of potential. Yeah? The problem is there's not the right skill sets, and so where to find those skill sets? Yeah? So India obviously is the natural choice. India has developed this industry. Yeah? India knows about the management processes. India has assessed what the skill sets, the skill gaps are from people who come out of school and then go into this industry and need some additional professional training. And they have specialized firms who can address those trainings, who can address those skills gaps. India, by now, has developed an industry association of organizations that are involved in this industry, and it's a very successful industry association. So what Nigeria needs to do in this case, it needs to go and learn from India. This is the type of knowledge and experience that simply is not available in the North. Yeah? So we live in a world today, there's a world of multipolar growth, but it's also, with that multipolar growth, we also see that this is a world with many more sources of knowledge and experiences to learn from. About conditional cash transfers, one can simply not learn in the North. Yeah? This has to be a South-South learning model. Yeah? When a country wants to go and develop a conditional cash transfer scheme, they have to learn this experience from another country in the South, because that knowledge and experience does not exist in the North. Yeah? And so today's learning that needs to take place is not training. It's learning from experience. Yeah? And it's learning from experiences between developing countries. Yeah? It's not a North-South model, it's a South-South model. Yeah? And so this brings us to the role that an organization like the bank can play. And so far I've been talking about kind of the analysis that we're making and the questions we are asking ourselves. Yeah? and the reality we're operating in today. Yeah, the question is, what can the World Bank contribute to this? We are a development organization, and we need to ask ourselves the question, what we can do. Maybe for those of you who are not fully familiar with what the World Bank Group does. The World Bank Group is very much a demand-driven organization. So we have a presence in 130 country offices worldwide. We work with developing countries, and the way the World Bank works is that we have a presence in those countries with country managers or country directors who have a dialogue with usually the Ministry of Finance at the other side, sometimes the Ministry of Planning, and based on the overall poverty reduction or the development strategy of the country, the World Bank agrees with the government on a strategic plan of assistance. We call this the country assistance strategy. In those, or in some cases, we call this also the country partnership strategy. What this country assistance strategy does, it provides an overall umbrella for the World Bank operations that will be undertaken in that country, and it captures nicely what the country wants to do, what it wants to learn, but more and more, and we've been working with our country offices on this, it also captures what the country wants to share with other countries. Yeah? So this is one dimension of what the World Bank Group has. Below this strategic level, there is a suite of operational instruments that we then apply, that we have worked out within our organization to actually deliver on those strategies. So far, you can group these most into two types of products. Lending products, where we give loans or credits, or let's say financial products. Depending on the income level of the country, this goes with different types of conditions, or knowledge products, usually studies and reports. Yeah? Where World Bank staff will go into a country, work with a country, or will hire consultants and develop a report on, let's say, the knowledge economy or jobs in a certain country, and then use that report to inform policy making. Yeah? So lending products or financial products and knowledge products. And the question we are asking ourselves here, and this is a question that is very burning right now in an intense internal debate in the World Bank Group, do we need to have a third line of business in the bank, which would be connectivity services, where the bank would not provide knowledge or provide finance, but where the bank would play a role of a connector. And that is basically what the topic of today is about. Yeah, and obviously what we need to recognize also is that the World Bank has strong sectoral expertise in certain areas. In certain areas we're very weak, in other areas we're very strong, especially in the traditional development areas, infrastructure, education, etc., private sector development, etc. Yeah, so those are the kinds of things that are also part of our analysis when we think what the role of the World Bank in this changing paradigm is, and what we think that the World Bank can usefully bring to the table. So I was talking before about the two traditional lines of business, the financing products and the knowledge products, and probably the need for us to start developing a new line of business, which would be the convening or the connecting instrument. And as I say this, there's a few countries where the World Bank is already experimenting with this, where we are explicitly talking about the third line of business in our conversation with the country. For example, Mexico is an example, Colombia is another example. It's mainly happening in the Latin America region, and this is not coincidentally a region where we have a lot of middle income countries, where the need for financing is declining, and the need for other types of services is coming up. So what we're doing in my group, in the World Bank Institute, we have a mandate to think through what such a connecting line of business would operationally look like. So if we think of the World Bank as a global connector, not an organization that imparts knowledge, but an organization that facilitates that the process of countries connecting to each other to learn from each other, how would this look like? And so, first of all, what we did is we tried to develop some sort of a conceptual framework for this. And I just quickly show this conceptual framework to you. Yeah. So, if you look at knowledge exchange, or let's call it South-South knowledge exchange, what an operational approach would look like. And apologies for there's some letters on the slide not in the right spot. If you look at this as a life cycle for knowledge exchange, this is just one way of looking at it, but for us it has proven to be very helpful to guide us on the kinds of things we would need to be doing. So on the one hand, if you start from left to right, there is somewhere a supply. Yeah. Typical case is Colombia has a strong desire to share its experience on rapid bus systems in urban environments, right? So it's a very successful experience and they like to share this experience. On the other side, there is a demand, yeah? There's some other country, some other capital or some other big city in a country that is actually thinks about embarking on a similar type of effort and would really like to learn from Bogota how they did this and what were the challenges they encountered, and so that if you learn from someone who has done it before, you're less likely to make the same mistakes. Yeah. So these two, the supply and the demand for a certain experience, they need to be matched somehow. Yeah. When they're brought together, then they're matched, and a knowledge brokering, in a sense, has taken place. Yeah. So when we know who is going to learn from who about what, and who is ready to provide this experience, and who is going to be the learner, or can be a group learning as well, or two-way learning, then the next step is, then we go downstream in the life cycle. The next step is that we need to think through how will this be designed so that it leads to result. Yeah. So is this going to be a study tour or a field visit, or is this a twinning arrangement, or what are the kinds of pedagogical instruments, if you want, that we're going to need to actually make the learning happen? That's the design part. Yeah. At the same time, this is an activity that will take place, not a tremendously expensive activity probably, but still it needs financing. Who's going to pay for it? Yeah. Is the learner paying for it? Is there a multilateral paying for it? Is there a trust fund paying for it? Is it embedded in an operation somewhere, etc.? Yeah. And then it leads to implementation. Yeah. In fact, this in the end involves a lot of technology when we use communities of practice, or it involves people traveling from one place to another, targeting the right people, making sure the learning actually takes place on site, etc. And that leads to our development results. Yeah. So this is just one way of breaking down this whole dynamic of knowledge exchange into some bits and pieces that can inform us on the types of things that we need to do in order to play a useful connector role in the bank. And so if we just break this down a little more, then you can see that on each of these buckets, there are actually useful things that can be done. Yeah? On the brokering side, this is supporting countries to know what they want to learn, know what they want to share, maybe their institutional capacity issues. In countries, more and more we're seeing that countries are requesting the World Bank to help them develop their institutional capacity for South-South knowledge exchange, etc. Yeah? On the design side, you see that there is a need to really capture how South-South knowledge exchange can be designed so that it leads to results. Yeah. On the results side, obviously, there is a very important need to document the results of South-South knowledge exchange. On the implementation side, there is a need to support countries to have the capacity to implement those exchanges. On the financing side, we need to develop financing instruments, right? So what I'm going to do now in the next 3 slides very quickly, and you can look more in detail at this later on, because this presentation will be available to you. We also have some links where I think this might be more useful for you to explore by yourself. I'm going to show a few of the things that we've been developing recently. Yeah, and we would really welcome your feedback on those things. And then I will highlight a few things where we think we need to invest some more time in the future before I close. One example is, and I wanted to bring a copy, but we do have a link of this, is a toolkit that we just completed very recently, which we've called the Art of Knowledge Exchange. And you can see it comes out of the design bucket. Yeah? It is a toolkit that we've invested quite some time in. So 2-3 people have been working on this for quite a while, and we've done quite a bit of consultation across the bank, but also outside, which is a result-focused planning guide for development practitioners. Yeah, it focuses on the how-to of knowledge exchange, and it's aimed at people like you and me and others in country who are actually going to design a knowledge exchange. What we've done is a few things that I think are quite critical. Yeah, first of all, we've embedded a results framework in this. We have embedded a series of questions into this guide that take you through a thought process of, first of all, identifying whether knowledge exchange is the right thing for you, but secondly, helping you to link it to your overall development goal. Yeah, and it goes up from the development goal down to more, what is your capacity development goal? What is the change process you want to engage in, and what are the kind of capacity outcomes you want to achieve? Is it about raising awareness? Is it about building coalitions, etc.? Yeah, and then down from there, it helps you select between what we have chosen to be 7 knowledge exchange instruments, which could be twinning arrangements, community of practice, policy dialogues, etc. And then some what works and doesn't work for each of them. So that's that guide, and there is, I believe, Sarah, there's a link available for you where you can download this guide. Yeah. Another thing is, this is under the financing bucket. We have developed a Multidonor trust fund. Yeah. This Multidonor Trust Fund is, for me, not the solution to the financing of SouthSouth, and I will come back to that in a moment. But it is a very interesting facility to help grease the wheels, if you want. Yeah? This is a facility, it's multi-donor. 5 of those donors, very interestingly, are middle-income countries. Yeah? So, and 4 of them are traditional donors. This is a facility that is really has raised a lot of interest with middle-income countries, and the fact that 5 of them are putting money into this facility shows what we've come to call here the desire to share. Yeah? These countries are typically countries, you see Mexico, China, India, Russia, Colombia, who have a strong desire to reach out to other countries who are developing their own development cooperation programs. China, obviously, and India already have some mature programs, but Colombia and Mexico are good examples of countries that are developing a development cooperation program, and really in the context of that want to become providers of cooperation as well, providers of knowledge, right? What we do with these facilities, we provide grants to up to $150,000 to countries who request through their World Bank channels and a certain amount of money to learn something directly from another country. The World Bank is not involved in providing knowledge. We are just involved as connecting just in time. This is one other example I wanted to give you. On the results side, we have developed this SouthSouth Knowledge Exchange portal, which I think has quite some potential, and I would like to invite you to visit that portal and then give us feedback. It features result stories from SouthSouth Knowledge Exchanges that we have been involved in. I think we have about 40 up there, and there are many more to come. We have a team of writers here who really try to point towards the development outcomes that the knowledge exchanges have achieved and what has worked and what has not worked. Yeah. We are a partner in the Global Development Learning Network. And you have the website there as well. This is more an implementation mechanism. We have about 120 organizations in developing countries who are very conversant with the use of technology for knowledge exchange, for video conferencing, webinars, these kinds of things, so that we can use as local partners to make knowledge exchanges happen on the ground. Yeah? And so those are just a few examples of the kinds of things that we are doing, and together we're seeing, when we place this on the life cycle, that all these tools together would give some meat and substance to a global connector role for the World Bank. There are a few more things that are on the horizon that I think are quite important to highlight. One thing that we've been struggling with, and again I would like to invite your suggestions on this, is the World Bank is a very fragmented organization. Yeah, so we are working in thematic silos. We have vice presidencies that work on certain things and not on other things, and the connections between those vice presidencies are not always as smooth as it could be. We work in regional silos. If someone works on a country, that person is not really working on some other country in another region. So there is really a need for us to think through how we can have a smooth flow of knowledge. For the World Bank to be a useful global connector, we need to find a systematic way of brokering knowledge. And we have been thinking hard about this, and I don't think we've already found the answer. So, but we know that over time, and sooner rather than later, we need to think through what is the global knowledge brokering solution that the World Bank Group can offer to the rest of the development community, not to compete with the rest of the development community, but just in order to get our own house in order and be able to be a useful knowledge broker. So that's one thing we are right now chewing on, and any suggestions will be really more than helpful. Yeah. The other big thing which I think is probably the most game-changing thing we can be working on, and we are now, we've started to work quite intensely on this year, is how can we incorporate South-South Knowledge Exchange into World Bank lending? If you look at the trust fund, the South-South facility, that's $10 million that we have so far. It's peanuts. Yeah. The real game is when, as part of World Bank financial support to countries, which goes into billions of dollars per year, yeah, we can discuss, but this is money that is then in the end country executed. It's money that's owned by the governments, but the design is done together between the government and the World Bank. Very often there is a capacity development component in there. We have not spent a lot of time and effort over the past years in really thinking through what is the best way to develop this capacity development component of these projects. If we were to have a more thought-through conversation with the government on how we can use South-South approaches in the context of capacity development components of World Bank loans, we would just be creating an enormous amount of money available for South-South Knowledge Exchange. Yeah. So this is really, and we're doing a pilot initiative on this year, and we'll be working with 10 operational teams in the bank who are going to incorporate South-South Knowledge Exchange into the design of their lending program, and maybe over a year or so I can come back and report some results on that. Yeah. The other thing, and I mentioned it quickly before already, is that we are seeing more and more countries, and there's now, I think already 4 or 5 countries have come to the World Bank. They've asked us, they've said, look, there is we want to engage more systematically in South-South Knowledge Exchange, but how do we do it? What kind of institutions do we need? How do we know? How do we make an overview of what we want to share? How do we package the knowledge we want to share? How can we get in touch with other countries who want to learn? What kind of institutions do we need, in short? And so this is clearly another an area where you have to start thinking about what we want to do. So this is just to give you a sense of the kinds of things we're working on that would complete some other gaps on the life cycle, if you want. So going forward, I just wanted to say that, and this is my last slide, and then we'll hand it over to you. We have talked in this presentation today very much about what the World Bank is doing, but I just don't want to be there a misunderstanding on this. This is a country-led agenda, and we have really are conceiving this as an agenda that belongs to the countries. Yeah? It's the countries who are learning from each other. We are reflecting on what a useful role for a multilateral like the World Bank can be in support of the countries. Yeah? And it's we need to recognize very much that this is also a global agenda. There are many, many, many partners that we are working with, and it's the regional, and this is just a few examples, and I just don't want to point out any ones in particular, and there are many more. We just wanted to give you, with this picture, a sense of the multitude of global partners that are involved in this. Let me just quickly highlight 2. First of all, I think it's important to recognize that this has become an important part of the development agenda of the G20. And in fact, we contributed this year on a report that talks about scaling up knowledge sharing. And I believe that that report is also available. And it really provides recommendations for countries on how to scale up the practice of knowledge sharing between countries directly. And we then also contributed to developing a quick follow-up report which specifically focuses on institutional capacity at the country level. So those two reports are available. And then the other part that I wanted to highlight is the Task Team for South-South Cooperation, which really is a country-led coalition of countries and organizations, and we are part of it, just a member, who have been doing a lot of analytical work on this. And I believe that Niels Schulz is on the chat here as well. And so he's been one of the drivers behind this Task Team for South-South Cooperation. And there's a lot of very interesting things that have been going on in that context, including a global best practice paper, etc. And together with the Task Team, we're working towards having a plenary session at the high-level forum on aid effectiveness in Busan, Korea at the end of this month, and also a thematic session. And much, much more is going to come out of that, and there's a lot of traction for those sessions. And so maybe when we come back from Busan, and I hope that many of you might even be in Busan and we can meet each other there, we can report back on what kind of the next steps would be.